So, welcome today to a really special podcast with my good friend Garry Turner here. So, we're going to be spending some time looking at what's going on in the workplace generally, what's emerging in today's organizations. And we're going to have a really deep chat about eldership, and also Gary's going to share some of his experience of what it's like right now in organizations and what's emerging in that space for us all maybe to keep more consciously aware of, and also kind of think about what's emerging, what in terms of the potential, what's potential for us all working in these organizations as well. So I'm absolutely delighted that Gary's joined. This is the first time, I can't believe it, Garry, that we've known each other quite a while now, and this is the first time you've been on my podcast. I'm on your podcast, so I'm just delighted that I can kind of get you here and in our community and share you with everybody else, because I know you've been traveling with the community, but you've not been spotlighted or highlighted. So just to kind of say that the first time I met Garry, he introduced me onto his podcast, and I think it was the Vulnerable podcast you were.
Yeah, value through vulnerability. Yeah.
Value through vulnerability. And we were talking about eldership, and that's the first time, Garry, you might not know this, but that's the first time I'd ever done a podcast about eldership.
Amazing.
So thank you so much for kind of bringing eldership into the podcast space. So that was, I was kind of beavering away, looking at it and doing the research and everything else. And then you went, oh, hey, come on my podcast. So that was amazing. And things really took off from there and led to the community emerging from that space as well. So thank you so much for that platform. It was amazing. So we've done a few, and we've actually met in person as well. So that's because Gary's, I'm from the north and Gary's from the south.
No divide here.
There's something in that, isn't there? I don't. There's something metaphoric about that. But anyway, so we've but we have actually met in person when you came up to Manchester. So it was great to actually finally meet you in person. So the reason I've asked Garry to come today is to share with everyone what's, if you like, his insights into what's going on in organisation. He's got, for me, Gary's got a lot of very unique insights, and he'll explain why, and if he doesn't, I'll chip in as to why you have these insights and see these amazing insights into the workplace and what's happening out there as well. So I'm not going to go into a long spiel about Garry. I'm going to let him introduce himself to you all, and then I'll fill in any gaps as we go as well. So over to you, Garry.
Oh, thank you, Zaina, and hello, everyone. Really appreciate you bringing me on, Zaina, today, and I do appreciate that story as well. I do remember you sharing it. It's really, really, really meaningful, and I think that's probably a great introduction, right, as to who I am and who I'm becoming as well, which I think is an important point, which is someone that is a dad, a doggy daddy, stepdad. They're the most important roles I have, but then coming into the workspace and beyond, I still am a corporate employee, so I do still work within a multinational, multi-billion turnover corporation that will remain nameless. So I've got an inside-out of industry perspective, but over the last decade, I've also built a very deep systemic understanding of the world through a personal journey of decolonization over the last 5 years that continues with a guide based in the Philippines. And I've also built, as I know you have here, a wonderful community, and those diverse perspectives, different backgrounds have really helped me be able to shape how I see myself in the world, work out who I might be able to become in the world, and how I do that in community. And I think my most recent thing, if I may say, is a new podcast platform, which is called In the Business of Healthy Masculinity. And this is really, as we discussed before we came on, I think it's probably my emerging eldership journey in many ways to create spaces for particularly men who haven't really had the space to interrogate their own healthy or unhealthy masculine traits, which really are part of what we'll discuss today for sure in terms of corporate challenges that I see and observe in 2025.
And I think kind of framing it, Garry, in that corporate space is what's so fascinating. Because obviously we hear people talk about masculinity and all those things, but I think when we put it in the context of organizations, it takes on a different form really as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And it's really interesting. There's a book, you can't quite see it because of the light, up there, and it's called Every Man is the book. I recommend anybody that might be interested in this discussion, full stop, to go and read it. It's a book by Dr. Jackson Katz, Zaina, and it's called Every Man: Why Violence Against Women and Girls is a Men's Issue. And what is really interesting, what drove me to set this podcast up, and I thank Dr. Jackson Katz, towards the end of the book, Zaina, he says, there's so much great work being done by charity groups, by community groups, by social groups. The one group he hasn't been able to tap into yet is leaders within business. There's this really common pattern systemically where it seems to be business is the final frontier that is resistant heavily to most of this change work, this progressive work that's really needed for us to heal, I believe, as sort of a species, to be honest. So that's really, really interesting framing.
Wow. And I know as well, you've not necessarily mentioned it, but you work in an organisation, but you also work with organisations as well, don't you? So you have got your own business that you have working as a consultant and coach. Am I right?
Yeah, thank you for that. So yeah, it's really interesting actually, and again, it's very evolutionary. Zaina, so it's called Radicality. So radicality.co.uk, and what it is, it's an ecosystem in essence of impact partners. So I'm sorry if you work at McKinsey, anybody, or at Deloitte, etc. Don't take this personally, but I wrote a blog a couple of years ago saying don't use McKinsey, use a network of independent practitioners. And so in a way, again, part of my own becoming is building this almost talent agency of transformational services where an organization could pick and mix based on their need rather than being sold a solution that somebody else thinks is the right way or the only way. So this is the sort of vision behind Radicality. And I myself am a thinking partner as well. I'm not a coach. I prefer to call myself, Zaina, a thinking partner. So I'm someone that's 25 years strategy, international business, commercial experience, still have current corporate experience, and my ability to listen, to hold space, to allow particularly men, but anybody, to sort of just stop, breathe, reflect, and really start to see what's possible for them. That's really what drives me, and what drives me into our relationship here today as well.
Wonderful. So it's fascinating that you've said that about that Everyman book, which I haven't read, which I will read. So that, if you like, leadership within organisations seems to be the last frontier. That's an interesting place to start, isn't it? That's the last one. So just, can you say a little bit more? Because I've not read the book. So can you say a little bit more about that to start?
Yeah, so I think what's really, so this is again, always welcome to be challenged, as you well know, Zaina, but one of the things I've learned a lot the last few years with this decolonisation journey I've been on is what we don't get to see within businesses in particular is the interconnected harm that's baked into the system. So you have a mixture, racism, supremacy culture, patriarchy. That's the really big, heavy stuff, colonialism. Then you go down a few layers and you're into global supply chains, financial services, politics. And all of this stuff is interconnected and nested all of the time. But within business spaces, it all gets literally put under the rug because the only thing that matters mentally is profit. So you've got this really interesting dynamic, and it's happening right now as I speak to you, as we're recording, where you've got complete and utter what I see as disembodiment in the power structures of big business, even within mid-sized business, but particularly big multinational business, the financial services, etc. There's complete and utter disembodiment, literally and figuratively, which means that all of the stuff that needs to be healed, all the stuff that we need to be talking about to move towards a co-created future that actually is going to be, we can give to our kids and grandkids, none of that stuff's been tackled. And this book just really lit a fire under me, because it was like, of course, violence against women and girls intersects with patriarchy, which intersects with racism, which intersects with men, particularly in business, not willing to have uncomfortable conversations. So it's just all of these really complex layers. However, it starts with us, which you always model so beautifully, right? It starts with, are we willing to look in the mirror? Are we willing to actually say, maybe I have made a mistake in the past? Or in my example, I remember Zaina passing over, hearing two leaders within a business talk about a woman who's pregnant and not giving her the chance for promotion because she was pregnant. And I didn't speak up or say anything, so I preferred to stay comfortable. So we've all got these stories in our lives so far. And what I'm seeing within business spaces is we're not willing to look at those previous stories. And that then perpetuates so many of these intersecting challenges and harms that we see day in day out in business.
And I think you hear such a lot of talk about kind of, oh, it's the patriarchal system. And I just wonder whether that naming of patriarchy is, it's so kind of, what does that actually mean? And I'd loved how you kind of mentioned all the different elements in a way within that, instead of just saying, oh, it's patriarchy. It's kind of, yeah, it's the colonialism, it's, you know, all that, it's the racism, it's the misogyny, it's like, oh, well, it's all these things, not just this patriarch, you know. So I'm just kind of, I just wanted to name that really as well. So thank you for kind of going, oh wow, it's all those things, because I certainly know in through my work working in organizations, you know, the hidden belief system that's still ingrained within the system, again hidden mostly in the system, is the old colonial thinking, you know, the belief in hierarchy. You know, it's
Mm.
like, and it's even in our conversations, you know, you can have kind of conversations with people, and there's an immediate kind of, oh, are you bigger than me? Am I bigger than you? And there's this kind of, and I know some people would say, well, that's a natural way of looking at the world, but it's almost like, is it natural? Because actually, I don't think it really is. You know, I feel like if you go into indigenous tribes, you know, there isn't that kind of hierarchy in the way that we've got it structured in the West, and certainly in the North. So it's a bit like, you know, I think we've perhaps not really understood that this is a kind of a belief system and a structure, like a hidden structure within the system, and that we could restructure into different ways in the way we organize ourselves as humans, but we don't, because because it's hidden, and also we're almost like we've contracted to agree to it on some level without even, you know, without that necessarily being conscious.
God, I'm having a big reaction in my back of my neck already. So, you know, I knew it'd happen. But no, I really mean it, because what's really hitting me as you're sharing that is something I really wrestled with. I still have the occasional moments, if I'm honest, but I've processed this a lot more. But the thing I really wrestle with, which most people probably aren't even looking at yet, Zaina, is this has all been done by design. Not at the outset 4,000 years ago, but every layer, every generation, every new law, every new thought process, every new financial instrument is designed to reinforce those hidden patterns.
Yeah.
And this is the thing that we really need to be wrestling with within organizations. And that's partly why I think it is the last frontier, because every other ability to move towards equality, to have open and honest, transparent conversations, that works, reconciliation conversations, whether it's South Africa, etc. So much of the work has already been done, which is great. But what I think we're witnessing now is that last frontier is there for a reason. It's the most degenerative, harmful, scared, fear-based place. And there's a lot of power and there's a lot of resource, you know, and without trying to go too political in the conversation, you know, the data is out there. Food bank usage has tripled in the last decade in the so-called developed UK, whilst there's more and more billionaires every year. Regardless of your political leaning, we've got to look at that and go, the system is not working, or it's not working for the masses at least.
Yeah, it's not working for the whole. And
Exactly.
therefore, in a way, even if it's only working for a few, it's not really working. Because actually we're a whole, so actually it isn't really working, is it? You know, that's where people have kind of separated themselves away and believe that in that individualistic kind of way of working. And I know we've had this conversation a week or so ago, Garry, that, you know, thinking about my experience of kind of, I really wanted to, I think, because as a kind of a consultant and an external person, and I've been external now for, wow, since I was 27. So do the maths. A long time, like, you know, 28 years, whatever. I'm working outside organizations. And you know, I've led projects, I've led change projects and so on. But I did feel like if I was going to step into eldership is about being in community. And it is about that equitable understanding that we all have, every single person has a contribution to make, and every single person is an essential part of any system. that I needed to, if you like, I needed to found a community. And so, and one of the things I've just kind of found within it, so that I've got a kind of a looser community of 200, but then setting up the Elders Business School within that, where we were a kind of much more closer and tight-knit community where we met regularly, a couple of times a month, and we had a kind of, we have got a platform where we can talk and share things with each other, trying to move towards understanding ourselves as a whole system. I think like we're all here to support each other moving forward. Has been quite interesting, because people still get caught in these kind of transactional relationships, and kind of seeing themselves as an individual rather than kind of being part of something in terms of a collective. And understanding, for instance, if somebody does well over here, we all do well with them. We all move, and that's been really, really interesting to see how people have navigated that over the last 2 years. So we've had that community for 2 years, and it's been very, very interesting and also people looking to me as the leader. So therefore, kind of, well, in some ways, waiting for me to tell them, to guide them, rather than kind of maybe coming forward and saying, I'm thinking we should be moving to here, or could we be doing this, or I'd like to bring this. That didn't happen as I would have expected it to happen with adults who were conscious, to me. So one of the things that we discovered was Bert Hellinger's, who works up from a systemic perspective in terms of human organizing systems. He always says the group is the mother. And that's very much so. If you go to a much deeper level in that, we that's in a way, that's what we were kind of working with. It's almost, and I suppose me being a woman would appear like that I am the mother of the group. But then it brought up quite a lot of stuff for people, I would say, where, if you like, there's not been that secure attachment for whatever reason in groups, in communities. So actually it's quite a challenge to kind of to stay vulnerable and stay connected and be able to find your voice in a community. So it's almost like if we're not careful, we kind of talk about how wonderful having a community is, of with all its equitable people being able to contribute, diversity, all that kind of stuff. But when we get into the reality of it, it's like, what comes up, what's emerging in that space? And I think that's kind of part of our challenge as well.
It's really interesting. It really resonates with me what you shared there, Zaina, because I've been part of online, certainly during COVID, I was part of a community, and it was a very uncomfortable community for me for all the wrong reasons. Why? Because it was very echo chamber like. So everyone agreed, everyone sort of shared about, yeah, we need to be listening more, we need to be caring about each other. And no one would disagree with that. But when discomfort was brought or an opposing point of view, it got shut down by the system, by the community. So I think it's really, really interesting. And I see this, we put this into a workplace context. Although, and I bring this to life, there's organizations that I know that have got a myriad of listening channels. So whether that be whistleblowing line, whether that be, anonymous idea channel, whether it be suggestion box. So there's lots of purported ways to communicate and give your perspective as part of the workplace community. However, if it comes anywhere out of a particular believed set of ideas, the system rejects it. So I see this really common pattern around, for me, community is, yes, it is loving, you do listen, you are all looking to build and grow together individually and collectively. But if you cannot create spaces for dissent and different points of view, you're probably a cult. And it's a really difficult realization, but I realized I was actually probably more of a cult than I was part of a community during COVID. And I think being able to have those honest, open, but loving conversations around what growth really looks like, I think is one of my ongoing growth edges for sure.
Yeah. So kind of going to the workplace then, what are you noticing is going on in the workplace at the moment? You know, I'm kind of thinking about things like, you know, I mean, obviously, you know, currently in the world, we're now we're now hearing from kind of, obviously it's more geopolitical, that, you know, diversity and inclusion, that's gone. Wellness, that's for for snowflakes. You know, the younger generations, they've lost the work ethic. You know, it's like, you know, old people, they're the resistant ones, and they need to be got rid of as soon as possible out of the workplace. You know, let's get them retired off, you know, let's get them pensioned off. So it's almost like, you know, with this idea that kind of, well, not idea, it's happening in reality, isn't it? That AI seems to, you know, technology is going to replace everything. We're all going to be okay. You know, well, what what are you noticing that's going on in, you know, in your experience and in the organizations that you know about, that's happening there, in terms of, you know, what are kind of some of the issues that the organizing system, do you feel, is facing?
Yeah, it's a brilliant question, and let's go step. You know, we can go in a million directions here, but let me start with one very profound recent one. So you may have all heard of Alembic, which is the big weight loss drug that's doing very, very well, and it's helping lots of people. Right, great. But I'm part of a pharmaceutical supply chain. Okay, so you know I know that market. Just for context for people watching and listening. Now, the manufacturer of one of the biggest drugs at the moment, making lots and lots of billions of dollars, helping people, but also making lots of billions of dollars, is a company called Novo Nordisk, based in Denmark. Now, Denmark has always been one of the darlings of being more inclusive, being more generative, you know, looking at a more circular economy, all of the really good things that we should be looking towards as industry. A new CEO came in a few months ago, Zaina. They are laying off 10% of their workforce. Okay. That's 9,000 people are being laid off, basically. Why? Because they need to save 1.8 billion per year in costs, because their pipeline of their new drugs isn't as strong as it should be. So why am I giving that framing? We're thinking financial markets, short-termism, profit myopic focus. Okay, so just holding those sort of traditional hyper unhealthy masculine focus areas, I would call them. When you dig into the data, and I've done a video about this, Novo Nordisk in just the first 6 months of 2025 made over 8 billion in net profit. So after R&D, after transportation, after salaries. So they've laying off 9,000 human beings and impacting all of those communities to save 1/6 of what they make in clear profit in just 6 months.
Wow.
So that as a story, that as an example, shows you exactly what's going on within businesses. And I see this in a whole range of different businesses where people, again, back to this disembodied piece, you know, fundamentally, but to bring it practically into day-to-day business, it's fear, right? You've got what I see as relatively, well, exceptionally well paid, quite often men in roles of power within industry, and far too few of them have eldership, ability, quality, curiosity. So what we're seeing is decisions being made about equally valuable human beings who are making a contribution that fundamentally don't need to be laid off, because you're still making plenty of money. But the system is saying financial services need to see X, you committed Novo Nordisk to make this amount of profit by the end of this year. You have a weak pipeline, therefore you need to cut your costs. And of course, being the dehumanized system that we're still currently part of, a cost means a number on a spreadsheet, which means those 9,000 people, they can go because they're just a cost, with no personality, no impact on community, no thinking about the impact on their work colleagues. So that's, I just want to hold that in case you've got any other comments, but I just want to bring that very real life right now example of what's happening within corporate spaces and business spaces in terms of that interconnected disconnection.
Mm, mm. And, you know, when we're looking at it from a systemic point of view and from an eldership perspective, you know, my question would be kind of, who were the original founders of this organization? Do we know?
It's a good point. Well, they're now, I believe that they're on the stock market, and I think there's an important point here to add, particularly when you're looking to work with organizations. If you're looking to work with a corporation or a multinational that is floated on the stock market, that immediately tells you that any familial history, any eldership value from the origins has gone. It's been erased. Literally, it's been erased. So, you know, I know I'm very close to a number of companies that have gone from being privately owned to being floated on the stock market. And I can tell you, Zaina, the leadership mindset, the culture, it's all destroyed.
Yeah.
It's all destroyed. It's literally a money-making machine, and that metaphor is used deliberately. It's literally a money-making machine. And this links then to your point about AI. You know, I won't detract too much from the conversation. That I've got a lot I could say about AI, but all I would say is disembodiment, again, is what I would say in summary about AI. It just reinforces a lot of these patterns we've already been discussing.
So I suppose then, thinking about, you know, this idea that we're you know, in some ways we're still trundling along to, you know, this disembodied entity of the corporation, if you like. And for many organizations, even if they're smaller, you know, like small businesses or small to medium-sized enterprises, they still in some ways look to the corporate as being the professional, and the way that, if you like, the way we're going, in a way, as in, like, at some point we might be able to sell, or we might be able to float, or, you know, we might, that's often what people imagine is going to happen to their organizations, and yet not necessarily realizing, like, the road, the path that is, you know. So if you founded this organization because if you like, you've noticed that there is a need within society for something that you can contribute with a business, for instance, and then suddenly realize, like, you've just sold it to this disembodied, or it's just, you know, it's floated into this disembodied space. I'm just kind of thinking about that for a second, thinking not many people realize that's going to happen, or the reality of that. And I certainly have met a lot of business owners who've gone down that road, and I've even facilitated the support of that as well, you know, and seen the reality that's hit them, and often then the guilt of, like, oh my goodness me, I had no idea that this disembodied being would then treat the workplace like that, that it would kind of get rid of people without thinking about it, or, you know, do it in such a way that was kind of quite ruthless, and quite disrespectful and dishonouring of what they've contributed and all those kind of things. So I suppose in a way it feels a little bit like this pressure for AI coming in, and obviously, you know, thinking about that kind of masculinity as well, of this competitiveness, of believing, like, well, we have to do this. In my head, as you were telling us that story of that organization, I'm thinking to myself, well, I can imagine what they'd be saying. Well, we've got to do this because otherwise we won't be as competitive, and we won't be able to survive if we don't do it. So it's like almost like this inbuilt survival belief that we have to do that in order to be able to compete. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
No, I think your summary, honestly, is absolutely spot on. And I think it is, you know, I like to, and again, I love your thoughts, whether this is eldership thinking or not. But, you know, I certainly would have liked to have, in that example, you know, how else could that have looked if we're looking at it from a more connected, generative place? Sometimes difficult decisions have to be made. Let's make that clear. But I don't believe they do when you're making the level of profit that organization was making to cover any perceived loss. And I think there's something here around, where was the conversation? Where, I'm sure there will be legal ones, you know, who's going to go, you know, payments, people will get on the rest of their lives. That's fine. This is just business. But I'm thinking, and I wrote about this, what would it have looked like for that organization to say, hey, our pipeline's not looking as strong, but we're still making really, really good money. I wonder if we did have to shed some people at some point over the next 3 years, who would want to go? Maybe you're looking for your next project. Maybe you want to retrain. But let's have a dialogue. Let's have a conversation about what we think we might look like in 3 years, and whether it really is as bad as the markets are telling us. And if it is, what are we going to do about it together? Back to your point about being a collective, rather than this, you know, the system basically saying, this is how we've always done it. We need to meet the financial markets, just slash 9,000 human beings off of our balance sheet. So I just get curious around that, Zaina, around, what could have been. Imagine your community being in that room as they were making that decision. What sort of things might you have been inviting that maybe wasn't in that room at the time? That's the sort of question I'm holding.
And I think one of the questions is for me is often when a chief exec who's more kind of aligned to the corporate system, the shareholders, all those kind of things, not recognizing that doesn't bring energy and life to a system. That's not, an organization is not founded for its shareholders. That's not what it's founded for. But they tend to forget that once it's kind of left the boat has left the shore, if you like, in terms of them not realizing they lose connection to what's that the fundamental principles that set that organization to life in the first place and to come into life. So that's why I said to you, I wonder why this organization was founded in the first place. What was it founded for? What was the vision of the founder, and also what drove the founder to found it in the first place? Because it can get hopelessly lost then in terms of its deeper meaning and purpose of what the system is there for, and then people then struggle to connect to it because they only come in to exploit it. I'll come here, I'll take a salary, I'll do what I need to do to kind of maybe, get what I need from the system without understanding there's an exchange happening here. So people are just exploiting the system then as well.
I love that, Zane. I really want to capture that moment about exchange, because the imbalance of what that perceived exchange is definitely one of the root cause harms within corporate spaces and business spaces that I see in 2025. People feel that they are too often, you've got a salary, you might get a bonus if you're lucky, but that is your reward. That's the exchange for you doing the work that is expected. It doesn't go much beyond that within corporate and business spaces. I think that's the juice, that's the missed opportunity. That's why, okay, it's once a year, but Gallup, in their engagement stats, 21% are fully engaged, Dana. Like, I know it's a bit, I know it's only taken once a year, but a global engagement company has shown yet again that 79 pence in every pound spent on salaries globally is wasted or ineffective. Like, talk about a system that is not working.
Yeah. And you're thinking about that. That's a really good point. That's such a low engagement. So therefore people are not bringing themselves to work. And I know we say that saying very flippantly. But it's soul destroying, isn't it, to work in some place that you feel has no meaning or purpose in what you're doing. So so you'll try and find that, I would imagine, from a work perspective, try and find that meaning and purpose somewhere else. If I can't, I'll take the money there and I'll go and live here instead. It's like you're not actually bringing yourself, you're not bringing life to an organization, because the only way you bring life is if you feel like you belong there. And there is that exchange happening, and there's some meaning in it as well.
It's really interesting. You've just joined something for me, which I've been feeling into, Zaina, but haven't always been so clear. And that is that, let's just bring these two things together. So you've got this disengagement issue, complete waste of money, although you're paying loads of salaries. And you dovetail that with the AI story narrative, which is we're going to get a lot more effective and efficient if we use this AI technology. And nowhere, and companies are throwing billions, Zaina, at digital transformation. Everyone thinks they need to be the next Amazon, right? Because that's the narrative that's being perpetuated by Western business, right? And by the tech bros, etc. And I'm like, but if you're losing 79% of your human beings on average every single day, what if you paused the digital transformation for just six months and poured every bit of your being into unleashing that other 79% of your humans that you're already paying a salary for? Wouldn't that be a better way back to health? Wouldn't that be a better way to try and unlock creativity and innovation and the next range of products, and maybe even help solve climate change? I just feel like these people are so wrapped up, the ones with power, And that's why it's the last frontier, Zaina, because
Mm.
the people that hold the power within these organizational systems are so wedded to the financial results, so wedded to hitting the target. It's wild. There's a guy I was talking to the other day, and this is where it gets even more peculiar within business spaces. And again, hopefully this is helpful for you and your community. One of the interesting things within business spaces right now is there's this budget process, right? Which is this completely made up process that sales teams go through every single year to make up a number that you agree with the financial market. That then becomes the target, right? No more, no less. We have to hit that number because that's what the markets expect. So you could bring a load of new ideas, innovations, you know, another cancer cure potentially that year, but you don't invest in all of that because you've told the market you're going to hit a very particular number. So you either rein back all of this positive development, or you've got a load of disengaged people, or there's just this really bizarre, degenerative mindset, system, financial market that all of it is literally, honestly, not don't want to sound too over the top, but it's literally killing us, literally and metaphorically. Because what it could be doing instead is saying we're part of a collective. We've got this interconnected global ecosystem that isn't just based on financial services. What would it look like if we were able to open our hands and our minds and look at what the world needs, not just what the financial market needs?
Yeah, it feels like a beast, doesn't it? That we're feeding somehow. And I'm one thing that kind of I just recognise is, having kind of been around like nearly, well, over 30 years in organisations at senior level, I remember it kind of, really starting to move into, because I kind of started working kind of, the back end of kind of Thatcher and the Conservatives in the UK, and then kind of it moved to Labour in kind of 97. But it, noticing that, if you like, everything suddenly becoming about finance. And now I'm kind of going, oh gosh, everything's now becoming about IT, isn't it? And tech and AI, it's like, yet again, it's this like disembodied thing, like like finance, what is money? It's just a means of exchange. It's not,
Yes,
we
yes.
seem to put so much onto it in terms of how we relate to it, but at the end of the day, it's a means of exchange. That's what it was designed to do, to kind of find a way of being able to create some kind of balance in the exchange. Whereas now, suddenly it's become something that we've used for power and for control, and so on. And it's like, I wonder now, it's like, oh, we're now in this AI and this new tech world that we're in. I'm saying new as in, like, I feel like we're fully in it now. Do you know, it's like it's been there on the edge, but now we're like, no, we're in it. We're in it. So we need to find a way of working with it. We can't almost say we can't work with it now in a way. And so here we go again into this disembodied, we don't need people. Oh, look, we can make even more money out of machines because we won't need people. But it's like, so what are we going to do with all these people on the planet then? Because work isn't just a means of exchange in terms of earning money. Work is a way of feeling that we are making a contribution. And I don't mean work as in like a job. I mean work. I mean actually being able to contribute and and bring your gifts and bring your skills and your talents, and your vibe and all that kind of great stuff and all that juicy stuff, in order to feel like you have something to contribute and that you belong. And so what we're going to do with that? It's all very well saying, oh well, what the jobs will be going. It'd be like, but what will we be doing then? What will we actually be doing? So I'm just kind of wondering what you're not noticing around that, because I certainly think that, this belief that, if you like, telling young people like, well, yes, what happens is, you do this, you might go to university or you might not, but then you get a job and then you earn some money and then you get a house and then you do this and then you do that. It's almost like where is all that in that space? If AI is so much in the space and we're not going to need people in the way that we needed them before, what have we got to offer these younger generations?
Cool. It's such a brilliant question, Zena, because I look at this through, again, multiple lenses, right? So you look at the birth rate is dropping, right? So there's going to be less people to pay pensions in the next generation or two. So this is already freaking out the systems as we know them today. So like, how do we pay and keep people in work to pay for the next generation, right? Because the whole system, again, is predicated on us working 40 years, right? And if there's less people in work, they've all been laid off, and there's less people having kids, that's actually collapse potentially unfolding, which we'll probably need, if I'm honest, from a financial service point of view, because at the moment it's so degenerative and so harmful. But the reality is, young people, we all know, those under the age of 25 now, they know they're not going to own their own home, or probably not. And a lot of them don't even want to own their own home. They're coming to work. I've worked with some of these people. They don't want to own their own homes. They want the flexibility. Technology is a good thing in some ways, right? You can work anywhere in the world. You can be a digital nomad. So it's almost like, I think it's Audre Lorde, was like the master's tools. So in a way, I think the master's tools are actually going to be part of this journey the next decade, which is the AI, the technology, the thing that is used. They're all agnostic, right? You alluded to this earlier on. Nothing at all, whether it's money, whether it's AI, whether it's a piece of stone on the floor. It's all agnostic until we get hold of it as human beings. I think that's a really important thing to remember. Is what we do with it is the most interesting thing. And I think all of these different intersections should be much more central to an organization's design as they go forward. They should be looking at engagement. They should be looking at lower birth rates. They should be looking at all of these, geopolitical issues. But within business, they're not. There is complete and utter combination of willful blindness and ignorance to what's going on outside of the organizational system. So you've literally got corporate, SME, corporate, and they're still all, even in 2025, when we've got everything live streamed all around the world, they still believe that their little box in the world, back to the whole binary thinking, what they do here, that's the only thing that matters. And I get it, because it's, they say about influence what you can influence. I agree with that. But we've got to realize, particularly within businesses, that all of those seeming boxes are interconnected. And that still hasn't landed yet. That's one of the biggest opportunities, I think, for you and your community, and for us all as humans, as we're growing and becoming who we're here to become, is to really bring that into every dialogue. Hey, client X, you do realize you're not just client X, right? You know that client Y, Z, B, and C over here are all deeply interconnected to what you're doing. Are they? Yeah. And I think that's a massive gap, I feel, within business spaces, that they're still extremely compartmentalized, even into the structure, as you said, hierarchy, right? You're in sales, the silos. It's easy to talk about silo working in a sort of HRE leadership culture, but no, understand what it is. That means complete disembodiment and disconnection from other parts of your system. And that needs to be bridged internally and externally for any sort of healing, I think, to come through the system.
Yeah, so for people to actually really I mean, I know we talk about systemic, but actually start to understand, like, no, you are part of something bigger, and understanding how that interconnectivity kind of works. Yeah, I like that. And I, kind of talking to some consultants last week, we were talking about kind of, what's happening out there in our, our understanding of kind of in the consultancy world, in terms of across organizations. And we were just kind of saying, perhaps a lot of the projects recently have been, in like a kind of like maybe like last 10 years maybe, has been all about technology. So kind of when you're doing restructures or reorganizations or that kind of stuff, it's been much more around kind of efficiency and technology, and obviously bringing in AI now. And yet the kind of the cultural thing just seems to have disappeared. It kind of has bubbled up, I think, with things like well-being and diversity and inclusion and those kind of things. But almost like as like initiatives it's almost like we've gone towards cultural initiatives rather than kind of zooming out about culture. It feels like we really, we seem to have lost our connection to culture and culture making, you know.
Mm.
For me in eldership, that's what we're doing. We are the culture makers, if you like. That's what it's about. It's about connecting people in terms of them understanding their sense of place and belonging within the system. So and if you like, what's the deeper principles that we are agreeing to and connecting to, and so on. So in a way, it's no wonder, is it, that we keep doing these blasted engagement surveys and keep coming back with the same results, going, oh, I wonder why they're all disengaged. It's like, because we do no work around culture anymore. You know, when I think about kind of the culture, you know, the subtle cultural stuff we used to do when I first started in this field was part of the training programs that we did. You know, there was like this culturalization that went on within the training. Well, that's all online now, or they don't even get any training. You know, all the training they get is much more kind of technical training or more functional training, rather than actually like deeper stuff that kind of makes us feel like we're doing something meaningful and purposeful, and we're gathering together in community, you know, in those groups for doing that training face to face, meeting people across different parts of the organization, going, oh my God, I didn't know. So your relationship building, all that seems to have gone from what I can see over this last 10 years. Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah, yeah, it is, and I think, and I'm wondering what that's a symptom of. Maybe that's something we can explore here, or on another occasion. But I think, you know, I was heavily involved myself with a particular organisation. I'm designing and developing their first ever, and still to this day, in-house L&D program, learning development program, and that involved literally bringing together leaders and subject matter experts from across the business, designing modules, time management, you know, negotiation, whatever. And that got, you know, that really worked well for people, because they were learning from and with their colleagues. They felt part of the journey if they were involved in delivering training or being facilitating, you know, Q&A, etc. There was an amazing buzz over those 3 years, but that's the only thing they've ever really done that was meaningful in the last decade, just as one example. And I think the other thing that's really telling for me at the moment with this, and I think it is a question that, you know, we have to keep asking, is the erasure, and I use that word deliberately, is the erasure of a focus on culture intentional by the system?
Mm.
And I think if we look at the US in particular at the moment, but more widely even here in the UK, you know, to be, again, I'm not going to go too political on your platform, but like, I'm as proudly woke as you'll find anywhere. Because if woke means being equal, if woke means caring, if woke means listening to somebody else's perspective, if woke means sharing things out so it's more equitable around the world, then I'm woke.
Wonderfully
And
woke, wonderfully woke.
but you know what? But I think that's part of the danger right now. Is there's a weaponization of everything in and outside of business spaces. There
Yeah.
is a right way and an only way to do things. And my invitation to all of us, you know, everyone watching or listening back to this, is get really curious about the recolonization that's underway. So colonization has never gone away. And I've been learning this on my journey the last 5 years. I thought it had. The erasure of books in the US, the erasure of books in the UK, the fact that Christopher Columbus was apparently an explorer and not a genocidist, right? At the end of the day, the narratives that we've all been educated with through school, and that we're still, and that's where culture is interesting, right? Because culture can also be propaganda, depending how it's been communicated. So for me, culture, healthy culture, Zaina, is we're always alert, we're co-creating, but we're also challenging, we're making sure, you know, we're not letting toxins into the system, whether that's a human, whether that's a team, whether it's a way of thinking. Like, that to me is healthy culture building. But culture can also be propaganda, which is, this is the way we're going to do it, this is the message to the market, you will fall in line. So I think there's a lot going on right now, but I don't think we should be under any disillusion at all that recolonization is underway, and we're watching it all around the world. Like, don't think for a second this isn't happening, because it is. And I think our invitation, the eldership invitation for me, is how do we, as you said already, how do we zoom out How do we create spaces for these good, well-meaning people? And that's why I'm doing the work I'm doing, right? That's why you're doing what you're doing. No human being, again, we're all agnostic, unless you're an absolute psychopath, which some people are. But I genuinely believe in my heart and soul that 99.9% of humans come into this world wanting to contribute and make a difference.
Mm.
So what has gone so wrong systemically over time, over layers, over generations, that we're even having this conversation now and watching recolonization occur in front of our eyes? And I think that's exciting to challenge that and observe it and be honest about it. And it's also challenging, and that's why we need us, not just me and you. And the we bit is so critical right now in this, I think, particularly within companies, because companies don't have inspiration. I'm speaking to Garry Ridge later, ex-CEO of WD-40, on my podcast. Amazing human being. He had engagement scores, Zaina, at 96, 97 all throughout his tenure. Right? He just absolutely created a place that people loved and that had made a great impact. But unfortunately, there's a handful of stories, I can count them on one hand, that keep on coming around over the last 10, 15 years. That's it.
Mm.
And so I think there's a lot to go after. There's a lot of change we can try and influence, but I think we've got to be really strategic. Got to be really, really strategic about those leverage points.
Yeah. And I think kind of going back and looking at the history of how we've got here is really, really important. I think we tend to be thinking about what solutions, instead of kind of going, well, actually, there is no solution as such, as in like it's too complex to come up with a solution. But by looking backwards and kind of walking the timeline of how do we actually get here? Suddenly we kind of see these moments that maybe we misread. We misread, or we were misinformed. So it's almost like, even kind of going back, which we've not done, to the kind of the lead up to the pandemic. To me, it's like what was happening because it's almost like we don't talk about pre-Pride. It's only post-pandemic now. So
true.
What happened beforehand? Where were we? What was happening? And then walk very, very slowly that timeline of what happened. And out of that, what decisions were made that sent us on this path to where we are today? Because it doesn't seem to me like we've had the time or the resources to be able to do that. It feels like we've gone, come on, let's just move on. Let's just move on now. We've got to kind of get on with it. But no, I know you've had to go at home working, but now everybody back in the workplace. It's almost like let's go back to how it was, and without kind of going, how you cannot do that. It's like when somebody's died, somebody kind of saying to you, well, you've just got to get on with it. It's like, well, actually, life is not the same. It's just not the same as it was. And there doesn't seem to be any acknowledgement of that. And therefore, then the decisions that were made out of survival reasons to kind of so that we could just continue to survive, but we've not stopped and gone, how do we get here? So for me, instead of the solution being kind of what should the culture now look like, it's more to do with what's just happened. Because I think this is I love the term, I've not heard of it before, this recolonization. I agree with, I think you're absolutely right, because it's almost like we're still locked down somehow. We're all still locked down. And I think, that the ability to lock people down in their own homes has not, and lock people out of the office and lock people, we've not really looked at that. We've not really understood how that has impacted us as human beings, and therefore how that then affects the way we think about the world and the way we behave as well. Because it's like that was a life-changing moment for every single person on the planet. So it's like that was huge. That was one massive collective trauma that we've never really looked at, that has obviously has its feelers because it's a collective trauma into our organizing systems, and we're still traveling with it. For me, I don't think we've really understood that, and I think that's the place to start, is to kind of go back, not look, as much as that, yes, what's coming towards us, but as part of kind of looking and what's in the emerging future, is to also kind of go, and how do we get here in our thinking?
I love that. I'm really curious, if I may, what you just described. How does that sit in your model that's behind you? Where does that sort of presencing, looking back, is it right at the base?
It's here, it's underneath this, it's the other world stuff. I
Yeah.
call it other world, because what we're looking at is kind of what are the patterns that have emerged from the pandemic. We never think about that.
Mm,
What are those patterns? And also kind of the history,
mm,
and not just the history of, you know, what happened to you personally. What's your history in this? You know, what happened to you and your family and your situation? You know, because I certainly know many people's marriages broken up. You know, people kind of families, you know, were left in difficult situations. People's education systems were really affected. So it's, yes, there's a personal experience of what happened to you in the pandemic, but there's also what happened to the systems, what happened to our education system, what happened to our economic system, what's happened to, it's like we just don't look at that. Or what happened to your organization, what happened to it, how was it affected by the pandemic, you know? So, and I don't, you know, I think like good and bad, so I'm not talking
yeah.
just negative here. It's like
Hmm.
the positive things that maybe emerge from it, you know? So let's not just look at what one thing, but that's what we're talking about here.
Mm,
But those are the areas that we'd be looking at when we're looking at an organising system, is that we'd be taking them back to kind of, how did you get here? You know, on a timeline, what are the events that have happened? That like, what were the moments? And because from those events, we make decisions, don't we, in terms of where we go? And I think
so
it's survival.
this is so profound, Zaina, in many ways, because what I can really see a strong connection with is what you just described, and the work I'm trying to do around having conversations and bringing healthier masculinity into the system, into leadership spaces, because it can't be an accident that we still have, on the whole, men in powerful leadership positions within most of the big industry, financial services, etc. And we haven't done that reflective work because the feminine energy has been suppressed, because that's weakness, right? To slow down, to not just be striving for the number in some people's heads, is a waste of time.
Mm,
So we're really missing. That's why I really do believe we're part of the antidote here to whatever's coming next is, without a doubt, a conscious focus on not only diversifying leadership in terms of gender, that's for sure needed, but whoever's in control, whoever's got influence and power, better balancing in a healthy way, consciously, the balance of those masculine and feminine energies in a way that is thriving, based on co-creation, based on health, not just on hitting a number for an arbitrary financial market.
mm, mm. Wow. Well, the one thing I do know for sure, because I'm going to bring it to an end now, but one thing I do know for sure, we need to meet again. And I also want to introduce people to your model that you've come up with as a result of the journey that you've been on, Garry, as well. So I don't want to let that slip from this one, because I know, because we've run out of time on this one to kind of go over it, but I do want to do.
My goodness, where did that time go, eh?
Oh, it's amazing. So I just, I know, like, I really wanted to do that. So we're definitely going to do that again. We'll definitely put something in to do that again, because in a way, this is like part one, and and the next bit will be part two as well. Because I really want to see, I want people to see the model that you've created as a result of these deep, reflective um, research that you've done on your own personal experience, but also what you're seeing out there in your organizations and globally as well. So there's just so much you've got to contribute to that as well. So we're definitely going to come back and revisit that as well. But thank you so much for this conversation, Garry. And I know when me and you come together, we could do a whole day, not longer, on this sort of stuff, because I know we really feed off one another. So thank you so much for your time on this podcast, and I look forward to the next time that we meet.
Likewise. Thank you for the invitation, Zaina, and thank you everyone for tuning in.